Hello again, Gooners. That was a funny one, that hello. But don't blame me. I've reached 50. Yes, 50 episodes of The Loose Cannon. This is number 50. And I'm going to give myself a green card, my library card. I'm going to give myself that. It's out of date, but we've been there before. I'll tell you what, we've got loads of news, loads of transfer news. No, I'll tell a lie, not that much. Just a bit, okay? So don't get too excited and don't get too depressed. That's my advice. I'll tell you what, if you know the answer to this question, I might even get you a beer, but you're going to have to contact me, and I'm notoriously difficult to get hold of, so some people say. Anyway, this is the quiz question for this particular episode. Number 50. I should get a silver medal or something. It's my silver jubilee, right? Anyway, the question is this. How much did Arsenal get from Juventus for Liam Brady? So we're going back to the 70s once more, because I'm doing that history thing, going back in time to Phil Saw and Martin Tyler's official history of Arsenal. So that's on the agenda. Somebody asked me about this Emirates sign, so I mocked up my own sign here. You see this sign here? It's got a loose cannon. If you have to really squint your eyes to see it, though, it's got a loose cannon underneath it. So just look at all the props I've got with me today. I've even got the transfer pipeline here. I might be using that in just a moment. But yes, the question is today, how much did Arsenal get from Juventus for Liam Brady? You might call this a bit of a trick question, all right? But depends on how you feel about these kind of things. But another trick question is, when is Robin van Persie going to leave? It was expected to be tonight, and now it's getting quite late, and he's still not a Manchester United player just yet. I know I shouldn't sound all happy and jolly about it, but to be quite honest, I am, because the Manchester Evening News, which is a respectable newspaper, reckoned that he was going to sign for United tonight. He was going to leave the training camps. Not happened. The senior players at United have now got egg on their faces because they expected him to sign too, and Robin van Persie, clearly not a happy man, by all accounts anyway, that this is turning into a protracted saga, which Arsenal were very good at. Well, enough said on that. I don't think we can say much more, apart from Mathieu Flamini, a big favourite of mine. I always call him Flames for some unknown reason, but I always shouted, "Come on, Flames! Come on, Flames!" Well, Flames reckons that Robin van Persie needs to be happy. Hey, don't we all? But you don't always get what you want in life. So, Robin, you'll just have to suffer for now on your huge amount of wages you'll get in. But I'm not a detractor of Robin van Persie. It's a short career, and I think we just gotta grin and bear it, let him move on. If he thinks things are going to be great at Manchester United, perhaps he'll be disappointed, perhaps he won't. We'll see. But looks like that's where he's going anyway, for £20 million apparently. So we won't get our £25 million after all, if that deal does in fact go ahead. Well, meanwhile, one deal that I really don't think is going to go ahead, but nonetheless is being talked about, is Cheikhou Kouyate. It's a 6'4" midfielder from Senegal, 22 years of age, plays for Anderlecht. Don't they all? All the players we've been linked with at the moment, because we played that pre-season friendly. We should never have done that. Since we played the pre-season game, just about every player in the Anderlecht team has been linked with us. And this is quite interesting because, yes, he's an Anderlecht player. He's played quite well for Senegal in the Olympics. His agent, Bekir Tedik, is really talking up a move, and he said, "I've received many phone calls." Again, I have to say once more, don't we all? I've had phone calls from what do they call it? Did you know you're entitled to claim against your former employer? Well, yes, I did know that. And did I know that I'm entitled to PPI and all this kind of stuff? Well, Bekir Tedik, the agent of this guy, this Cheikhou Kouyate, seems a kind of similar sort of guy. He's receiving the phone calls just like I do. So what is what I say. Anyway, he reckons he's had phone calls from almost every team. So that means he's had, like, what, 90 calls? There's 92 teams in the English professional divisions. Oh, that's not including the conference. So you throw the conference in, he's had over 100 calls just from England. Then Russia, he's had a load of calls off Russia, the Russian teams, and from Turkey too. So clearly this guy lives in a bit of a fantasy world. Sorry, Becky, if I ever meet you, I will buy you a beer and say sorry, but I want to know which clubs have contacted your client. Nothing against him. The Senegal players, generally speaking, are pretty good players in my opinion. But the interesting thing is Anderlecht's general manager, GM, genetically modified. Not much of a gag, is it? But every time I see GM, I think genetically modified. Well, the genetically modified Herman von Holzbeek claims that there have been no bids. So, work that one out. What has really happened? And there is something funny going on, though, because I read somewhere that Cheikhou Kouyate has a French passport, but this genetically modified GM, Herman von Holzbeek, says that because Cheikhou Kouyate is not an international for Senegal, he can't leave Anderlecht and move to England. Well, clearly that's not true. If he already has in his possession a French passport, it would be a restriction of trade if he weren't allowed to move. So somebody somewhere has got this slightly wrong. I suggest it's probably most of the stuff that's wrong is coming from the agent, but as I said, I could be being a bit unfair, but it's just my opinion for what it's worth. And of course, talking of Anderlecht brings us back onto Matthias Suarez, and his agent is Christian Colazzo, and interestingly enough, he's looking to naturalise Matthias and make him into a Belgian citizen. And of course, he's an Argentinian international at the moment, this striker, and well, I think he's obviously played for Argentina, otherwise he wouldn't have caps, would he? But has he played enough games to make a move to this country? But that does seem like it's got more legs in it, that particular story. The Kouyate one is just a bit of agent stirring up the hornet's nest, if you like. Why do I keep saying hornet's nest all of a sudden? But meanwhile, while we've been linked to 2 players now from Anderlecht, we're now being linked to 2 players from Celtic. Seung, £9 million, the transfer fee being talked about for the Korean Gerrard. Believe it if you want. I don't personally believe it, so I'm not going to go into that one for now. If I find out there's a bit more to that story than I think, then I'll get back to you on it. But right now, no, I don't think so. Well, meanwhile, as well as all this transfer news going on, very important news for the future development of the club has emerged. Obviously, the under-19s taking part in the European Champions League. We've been drawn against Athletic Bilbao, Marseille and Olympiacos. These games will take place at the very salubrious Underhill Stadium in Barnet. So, who can we look out for in this 32-man squad? I can tell you to begin with who we can't look out for, and that's Benik Afobe, because of course he's gone on loan to Bolton. He's in the squad, which frees up a space, I imagine, unless that gets overlooked, and surely a professional club like Arsenal won't do that. Well, I'll tell you my picks out of the 32 young man squad. Young man! I just wanted to say that, sorry, so I said it twice. But Reece Charles Cook, I think, is a very decent goalkeeper. There are only 2 goalkeepers named in the squad, which is odd, and rhymes as well. Looking at the defence, Martin Anger is my favourite by far. When I saw him the other day, he was skipper and he did an excellent job. Hector Bellerin is an excellent player too. Played at right back when I saw him. Really, really sharp. He came on as a sub, but in the time on the pitch, he's got tremendous class. Other names that we've heard of a lot: Sid, I don't know how you say his name, Hajrovic, and Carl Embasilio, of course, they're known to a lot of us. Who else? Elton Montero. Maybe I'll remember him more for his first name than anything. Chris Olsen, of course, in midfield, has done really well in the pre-season, as has Nico Yenaris, or Yenaris, as somebody once called him. I think it's Yenaris, but I'm not sure. Who else? Jon Toral. He was at Barcelona at one point, but I don't think I've seen him play just yet. I really want to see him. Josh Reese. He's a name that some of us know. Thomas Icefield, of course, has really been ripping up trees with his performances in terms of goals, at least. Serge Gnabry has gained a lot of attention recently. Chuk Sanike also playing really well in pre-season. So some big names in midfield in particular. We look well stocked in that department. Sorry about some of the players I missed out. Jordan Winter, I think I saw him play, but I don't recall remembering much about his performance. The same goes for some of the strikers, actually. Philip Roberts, I've seen. Anthony Jeffrey. Chuba Akpom played really well the other day at Boreham Wood. He scored a goal from the penalty spot and won a penalty. He was a real handful, but probably needs to fit into the Arsenal way of doing things a bit more, but a real prospect he is. Zach Ansah, Also a player I've seen but don't recall too much about him. So yeah, that's how we're lining up for the Champions League, the under-19 version of it, and I hope we do well. I think certainly looking at the midfield, you'd have to say yes, we will. But sounds a bit like Bob the Builder, doesn't it? But yeah, I think we'll do well in it. We'll see, of course. But I think we need another goalkeeper. So now that squad number is free. You know, we've only got 31 in a 32-man squad. 32 young man squad. I think we should throw in another goalkeeper. So you know, we've got plenty to choose from. So hopefully the club will see the light. Well, now is the time, if you don't like Jackanory, to switch off. But if you do, you can find the answer to the quiz question, which is, I even remember it this time, how much was Liam Brady sold to Juventus for? And it's a bit of a trick question, really, because I think a lot of you will get the answer wrong, and I think I certainly would have done. So where were we last time? Well, we was in the glory year of 1979, weren't we? So following our FA Cup victory against Manchester United, what happens next? Well, we had the Charity Shield, didn't we? So now I will continue reading from Phil Saw and Martin Tyler's book. At the start of the 1979-1980 season, Arsenal returned to Wembley for the traditional Charity Shield pipe opener. Pipe opener? I've never heard it called that before. Pipe opener, only to be given a lesson from Liverpool, who won 3-1. It was a typical performance from the champions, highlighting the high standard of teamwork which has been the hallmark of Liverpool's continuing success. Well, when this was written, that success was continuing. This Arsenal side were capable of playing as well as Liverpool on their day and were to prove even better in the FA Cup later in the season, but Terry Neal's team never reached the same level of consistency which wins titles over the Marathon League season. It's a sprint, not a marathon. Sorry, that's the Cups. Europe threw up an unappetising opener against the Turkish team Fenerbahce. Don Howell, who had coached in Turkey, wrote them off as credible opposition, but the reality was different. Arsenal had to work hard for a 2-0 first leg lead and needed nerves of steel to play out a goalless draw in the forbidding atmosphere of the Turks' own stadium in Istanbul. Juventus, Nantes and Valencia were all in the draw for the second round, but Arsenal avoided them and were paired with the East Germans of Magdeburg. Willie Yeung's knack of scoring important goals when they were least expected proved priceless in establishing a slender 2-1 lead. To be honest, all of Willie Yeung's goals were least expected to me. Anyway, he got the goal in, got a crucial goal in helping us establish a 2-1 lead. But the team did themselves proud away from home to earn a 2-2 draw and a place in the quarterfinals. By this time, Arsenal were being regarded as the best cup side in the league. Although in the actual League Cup, their old foes, Swindon Town, damaged the reputation in the fifth round when they won an exciting replay 4-3 with the help of own goals from Steve Walford and John Hollins and a winner from the prolific marksman of that season, Andy Rowland. The championship challenge was undermined by the distractions of 3 simultaneous cup runs, but also by the inability to turn superiority into points at home, where the Gunners won only 8 games and drew 10 in finishing 4th. Liverpool won 15 and were unbeaten at Anfield, while runners-up Manchester United won 17 at Old Trafford. The Gunners liked to counter-attack, a major reason why they won 10 away from home. Finally, there was the price of success in domestic competition and in Europe. Fixture congestion towards the end of the season, a burden other top clubs, particularly Leeds United, had already found too sapping. Arsenal again avoided the really big boys in the Cup Winners' Cup and celebrated at Highbury with a 5-0 eclipse of Gothenburg. The goalless draw in Sweden was a pure formality, but the semi-final draw paired them with the favourites and giants of Italian football, Juventus. In a controversial first leg at Highbury, Juventus took the lead through a twice-taken penalty. David O'Leary was put out of the game by World Cup striker Roberto Bettiga, and Marco Tardelli, another Italian international, was sent off for a foul on Liam Brady. Justice was done when Bettiga provided Arsenal with their equaliser by putting through his own goal. It's amazing they were putting in challenges like that on Liam Brady, knowing full well that he was about to become one of their teammates the following season. Arsenal had hardly time to draw breath before they were pitched into an FA Cup semi-final with Liverpool after making steady, if undemanding, progress through the competition at the expense of Cardiff City, Brighton, Bolton Wanderers and Watford. Neither of the Reds could overcome defensive work at Hillsborough in the first game, so it was off to Villa Park. but it finished 1-1 after extra time, so West Ham, who overcame Everton in their own replay at Ellen Road, had a little longer to wait to know their Wembley opponents. Hostilities were suspended for Arsenal's trip to Italy for the second leg against Juventus. Now, odds-on favourites to reach the final, especially with an away goal at their disposal. Of course, it's always difficult to overturn those kind of odds against Italian teams, or it always used to be the case, maybe not so much nowadays. But Arsenal produced one of the most outstanding results in 25 years of European football by winning 1-0 in Turin on a ground where no British club had ever triumphed, nor for that matter had any other European opposition for 10 years. I should have put that as one of my questions, but next time, eh? Paul Vasson, a professional for less than a year, was in the right place at the right time to score a famous winner 2 minutes from time. With Juventus having an away goal, the Gunners were 2 minutes from elimination. Vasson, who must have felt the whole world was at his feet that night, but within 2 years, his career was over, cruelly cut short by a serious knee injury. I understand it's the late Paul Vasson, unfortunately, nowadays. The FA Cup semi-final struggle with Liverpool was renewed for a second time at Villa Park, and Sunderland broke the deadlock after just 13 seconds, the fastest ever semi-final goal, but Kenny Dalglish equalised to make a third replay necessary. Off they went to Coventry's Highfield Road for another try, with wild rumours being bandied about concerning American-style shootouts, penalty kicks, and probably tossing up to see who went through. Neither side were happy about any of the suggestions and would have been quite content to play into the summer to settle it. But the problem was solved by Brian Talbot's lone goal at Coventry, and they didn't even need extra time. To outlast Liverpool over 4 games had been some feat, and taking into account the Juventus distraction, very creditable. The 4 games have been watched by we've done all those stats. About 170,000 fans paying over £620,000. Doesn't sound a lot nowadays, but back then, believe me, it was a lot of money. Interestingly, this is the highest aggregate attendance to watch a British Cup tie, excluding finals, ever recorded. And again, that should have been another quiz question, but the quiz question remains: how much was Liam Brady sold for? Or how much did we get? Maybe that's a bit more of an accurate way of putting it, from Juventus. Anyway, Liverpool took defeat in their stride to retain their league title 2 days later by beating Aston Villa 4-1, but Arsenal's 9 free days to prepare for Wembley were not to give them the edge against their old London rivals West Ham United, who were still trying to escape from the second division at the time. The final was one to forget for Arsenal, who never came to terms with West Ham's astute tactic of using Stuart Pearson in a withdrawn centre-forward role. Stuart Pearson, of course, was an ex-Manchester United player, and a very good one at that. But still, I never expected us to lose that game, particularly to a Trevor Brooking header, of all things. Pearson had been a Terry Neal discovery while he was at Hull City, had won 15 caps for England while playing for Manchester United, and was given the Hammers a fine season at the end of his career. It was another veteran who finished off the Gunners with an unusual winning goal as Trevor Brooking stooped low to deflect a misdirected shot past Pat Jennings with his head. Brooking was to confirm later it was only the 3rd goal he'd scored with his head in a long and distinguished career for West Ham. Never a classic, with Arsenal well below par, the match did make one piece of history when West Ham's Paul Allen became the youngest player to appear in an FA Cup final at 17 years, 256 days, taking the record away from Howard Kendall, who had held it since 1964, playing for Preston in their defeat by West Ham. Arsenal could have done with some young legs themselves. Brian Talbot, the only ever present that season, gave so much in midfield that he collapsed with exhaustion on the coach leaving Wembley. The front runners, Frank Stapleton and Alan Sunderland, looked particularly weary, and it was obvious that the titanic struggles against Liverpool had taken their toll at the end of another long, hard season. If we're to be frank, it was really a final to forget. Willie Yeung's professional foul on Allen, which denied the young player an excellent chance of a goal 3 minutes from the end, remains in the memory. This was doubly unfortunate, as Arsenal were creating a record as the first side to appear in 3 consecutive FA Cup finals in the 20th century. The omens were not good for the Cup Winners' Cup final 4 days later in the Heysel Stadium, Brussels, against Valencia, managed by Di Stefano and boasting the talents of Argentina's World Cup winning striker Mario Kempes and the West German international Rainer Bonhoff. Defences dominated a tense game through 90 minutes and half an hour of extra time, Kempes being blotted out by the superb David O'Leary. Neither side was able to score, so one of the biggest nights in Arsenal's history was to be decided by the excruciating experience of a penalty shootout. The tension got to the biggest names on the field. Kempes and Brady, who both fouled with their first attempts. The score reached 5-4 in Valencia's favour when their goalkeeper Pereira, who had moved for all Arsenal's attempts, did it again as Graham Rix approached. This time he guessed correctly where the shot was going, and the final was lost. Graham Rix, who, although only 22, had been through most experiences in football, was in tears, and not even the thunderous ovation of the 15,000 Arsenal fans in Brussels that night could lift the desolation felt by a team which had been required to play 15 matches in 45 days before the big night. So that is proper fixture congestion. But the footballing fakes had not finished with Arsenal yet. They came home with a UEFA Cup place the next season still in the offing if they could win their two outstanding league games. 48 hours after the Valencia match, they went to Wolves and somehow won 2-1. But on Monday the 19th of May, they were required to make the long trip north to Middlesbrough and finally cracked in their 70th match of the season. The UEFA Cup place disappeared in a 5-0 defeat to leave Arsenal so near, yet so far in another competition, the league, in which they finished a creditable fourth to Liverpool. Can any team have worked and played so hard to achieve nothing at all? Of course, a lot of Wenger teams have worked hard, but not played that many games, I don't think. Those 70 first-class games remain the most ever played by a British club in a single season. It was the classic English football failure, and no less bitter for all its predictability. The denouement in Heysel was, in retrospect, clearly a watershed, though how can we tell whether it should have been? The irony was that it had been Liam Brady and Graham Rix who had missed the crucial penalties, and they were then, and are now, rightly regarded as the most influential of all Arsenal players in the past 10 years. Who can say what would have happened if either of them had scored? Could Highbury now be different? Well, obviously we're not at Highbury, so that kind of makes that question a bit invalid. It was to be 5 years, virtually to the day, when the same Heysel Stadium staged its next one-legged European final, Liverpool versus Juventus, in the 1985 European Cup. That shattering game was not just to conclude one club's brief period of success, as Arsenal's 1980 defeat had done. It effectively brought to an end the post-war history of British football. The double disaster of 1985, Bradford and Brussels, plus the long simmering dispute about televised football, finally flung the continued existence of the professional game, as it had been known in the 20th century, into the melting pot. For Arsenal, the years between 1980 and 85 had not been turbulent or traumatic so much as, according to many of the fans, tiresome and tedious. Attendances fell from 36,000 approximately in 78-79 to 28 in 83-84, and off a precipice through 85. Charlie Nicholas came and Terry Neill went, but standing in the Marble Hall looking at the bust of Herbert Chapman, one could be excused for thinking this was not a period which history would compare favourably with what had gone before. It is never easy to define turning points, to decide when the pendulum begins to swing back the other way, but for Terry Neill, Don Howe and the team that had memorably reached 4 cup finals in 3 years, the moments that mattered were the days that Liam Brady and Frank Stapleton departed. See, we're getting near the quiz question now. How much did we get for Liam Brady from Juventus? Neither was effectively replaced. Oh, we've heard that story before. Although not this summer, so give the club credit, eh? Neither was effectively replaced, Frank Stapleton's place proving an almost intractable problem with a whole stream of pretenders, Hawley, Chapman, Hankin, to name but 3, and less than perfect stopgaps. In the end, even an England centre-forward in the shape of Paul Mariner could only be seen as a short-term solution. Frank Stapleton went in 1981. His contract was at an end, and he had a right to move wherever he wished. He is a somewhat unusual footballer, as Terry Neill says, a non-smoker, a non-drinker, and a practicing Catholic, a thoughtful, studious man. I don't know if the accent's good, but I gave it a go, right? Terry Neill also relates how frustrating the negotiations were. Frank sat quietly, and virtually all he said was, "Make your best offer." Arsenal did, though it wasn't to match Manchester United's. Even so, Martin Edwards, chairman at Old Trafford, commented afterwards that he was not sure how United could afford what they had offered. Terry Neill, like most people in the game, has no objections to a player trying to obtain the best he can. It is a short career at best, and one that ill-fits a man in his late 30s to do anything else. What happens to all the players who don't become managers? The ex-manager refers sympathetically to Paul Vasson, who at the age of 18 scored the critical goal in Turin in the semi-final of the 1980 Cup Winners' Cup against Juventus. That proved to be the greatest moment of his career, said Terry Neill. For sadly he was forced to retire not long afterwards, with a knee injury. One of the grimmest truths about football is that every player can be one tackle away from the end of his career. I realise that my Irish accent is really poor, so you don't have to make a comment on that. You can make comments, but don't say anything about that. I know. Liam Brady, the other critic, and it's also the wrong part of Ireland that I'm doing. I'm kind of trying to do a Southern Irish accent because I can't do the Northern Irish one hardly at all. Anyway, Liam Brady, the other critical departure, became a free agent. Here comes the answer to the question. He became a free agent. So you're going to say free, but you're wrong. He became a free agent in 1980 and went to Juventus for the maximum £600,000. So it wasn't a free transfer, was it? That was allowed by UEFA and the EEC for international transfers. Arsenal's final offer to Brady would have made him the highest paid player in England, but it was the challenge as much as the money that was motivating the Irishman. Can we say the same about Robin van Persie, I ask you? He was to settle extremely happily in Italy among the rest of the world's top players. The ability of the Italians to pay sums way beyond those on offer elsewhere in the world is a result of two financial advantages: the effective sponsorship of the clubs by major individual firms such as Fiat with Juventus, and perhaps more pertinently, that attendances are much higher than elsewhere. In the mid-1980s, average Italian First Division attendances were more than double those in England and treble those in Scotland. So United and Juventus got their men, while Terry Neill and Don Howe got a mere £1.5 million, very little by European superstar standards, and an almighty headache. So does that mean we got quite a lot of money for Frank Stapleton, even though he was on a supposedly a free agent? Of course, that was pre-Bosman, so I'm assuming by that yes, we did get a decent fee, like £900,000. It's not bad for a player out of contract. Said Terry Neill, "It was a tragedy of monumental proportions for the club. No one can begin to understand the agony I went through during this period. It meant years of travel as I searched for adequate replacements and frequent criticism for having sold two such gifted players." The criticism was, as we've seen, essentially unfair, though Terry Neill never did find the right men. Against that, it is difficult to see, short of signing Brian Robson and Ian Rush, which of course he couldn't do, where players of a similar standard could be found. Frank Stapleton was the best forward of his generation. Many memories of his skills will remain, but one which shows his value to the club perfectly is the late header which won the 78-79 FA Cup quarter-final against Nottingham Forest at the City Ground. It was a classic effort, 10 minutes from time, and it was the only goal of the game. So he was a talisman, really, as much as Robin van Persie. So you can imagine how upset we all were when we lost Stapleton and Brady. Knew we were going to lose Brady, but Stapleton was, to me, it was quite shocking at the time. The significance was in Stapleton's rare ability to win games which by rights Arsenal should have lost. Forest had not lost at home for 52 matches, were on their way to the European Cup, were clearly the team of the moment. Stapleton's goal took Arsenal past their most difficult hurdle. After that, anything was easy. And it's also easy to say goodbye now because I'm starting to feel a bit tired. And I hope you're not tired of this vlog or whatever you call it. Until the next time, up the Gooners!